Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome to this week's live stream. This week we wanted to present a brief learning that we got from a hit that we launched recently, and then we'll address all your questions in the Q&A. Thanks for starting to post them already. I see that we've got a bunch of questions in YouTube, and we'll try to get through as many as we can right after this short presentation. So this week we wanted to discuss Perfect Hit. We'll just show the slides right now. So Perfect Hit is, as I mentioned, a game that we launched recently, so only about a month or two ago. And the key learning from Perfect Hit is you may be familiar with our process and our approach of testing prototypes, iterating prototypes, and killing prototypes when they have minimal potential, or when we think that we've exploited the full game to its best extent. In the case of Perfect Hit, we did that in a first phase, and actually we literally killed the prototype for a while after testing a couple of iterations, and then we came back to the prototype a while later when we came up with an innovative gameplay feature which we had actually identified in another game. So with that said, let me deep dive into this for a couple of minutes. So, as I mentioned, Perfect Hit was tested. It was tested 2 or 3 times. The reason we drew our attention to it is that the CPI was actually showed great potential. On the very first test, and this is quite rare, our CPI was as low as 20 cents. And so we really wanted to focus on the limits of the game in terms of retention to bring some more potential to the game in the first 2 or 3 tests. It turned out at the end of the day that the prototype didn't work out in this first phase, and so it was dormant for about a month after we initially tested it. We then tested the game down the line after having killed it with a simple adjustment that we got from another game that we had launched recently. And with that adjustment, with that single adjustment, we were able to both reduce CPI and increase retention to the extent that it was publishable. So let me just go over those 3 steps. So step 1, this was the first test. We got this test from Jan Kovac. So a shout out to Jan for a great job, by the way. This is his first published game with us, and he did a great job. So the game came to us with great potential, as I said, about 20 cents CPI, but our D1 was around 40% and our D7 was at around 9%. So there was a lot of work for us to do to make sure that we got to that 55 and 22% that we needed. While there was that potential from a CPI perspective, so we knew that users were interested in the game, they were interested in the gameplay, it was fairly original, I have to say, and visually appealing. So that explained our CPI. On the other hand, retention was poor, partially due to complexity in the gameplay and complexity in the controls within the game. And the second major thing was that the game was not forgiving enough. And these are, part of our basic rules, making sure that the gameplay is straightforward, and that the game is forgiving, and that the controls are easy to use. So in our second and third tests, we proceeded to do something very simple, which was to make the game more forgiving by creating a snake dynamic where instead of having a single ball as an avatar, you could pick up balls and grow your avatar as you go along, a little bit like in Snake vs. Block. And we also simplified the gameplay by creating a kind of 2D target that swung left and right, instead of having this complex 3D target with targets within it. So by simplifying the controls in the gameplay, we were able to increase retention slightly, so from to about 42% day 1 and 14% day 7. But because we simplified the gameplay as well and included a target instead of having a more original kind of 3D target, our CPI was also increased. So the gameplay was a little bit less original, and this probably explains the higher CPI. But on the other hand, the basic rules were more respected. So things like the simplicity in the gameplay, forgiving gameplay as well. These helped us reduce day 7. Unfortunately, as you can tell, we were far from the publishing metrics at that stage after about 2 or 3 tests. Jan was also working on other prototypes all along. As you know, we try to aim for a number of prototypes every month. And so we decided to take this decision of pausing work on this game, effectively killing the prototype, and we did so because retention was a little bit too low, CPI was a bit high, and that was it for now. Now, about a month later, this was for test number 4. What we did was we came up with this idea within the publishing team at Voodoo that was applied to another game. Actually, it was applied to 10Q, where you have more continuity in the game by putting a hole within the target at the end of the level, which then enables you to drop into the next level. We weren't going to apply this to every single game that we have, but it felt particularly relevant to Perfect Hit, simply because we were struggling with the target, and we were struggling with an innovative gameplay. And this kind of simple solution gave us both answers. We were able to, thanks to Jan's great execution on this game, he was able to create a target that is really visually appealing, so that would help us reduce CPI, and to create a 3D dynamic at the end of each level that was really appealing and very satisfying, and it really drew the user into the next level, or the next stage, as it were. So in a sense, we extended each level by 10 slides and 10 platforms rather than creating siloed individual levels. That simple adjustment in the gameplay was drastic. From the very first test that we added this feature in the target and changed the target, we were able to increase retention on day 1 at 60% from 44%, and day 7 at 22% from 14%. We were also able, and this is particularly interesting, to reduce CPI from north of 40 or 50 cents to only 15 cents, where it was originally at 21 cents. So by creating a game that was more original than the first prototype we received, and by applying the basic rules to this game, we were able to make Perfect Hit a game that we were then able to publish and launch. So once again, thanks a lot to Jan. He did a really great job, and congrats. I think this is a great learning for us, because especially as a publishing team, because we were able to also apply different learnings from this game to other games, and especially from 10Q to this game. So definitely an example of our team working well together, and great execution from our studios. So with that said, I think it'd be good to jump into your questions. We've got a few here. I think Hugo is going to join us as well.
I'm on my way.
Here he is. You've heard me speak for long enough
guys.
now.
Nice to be with you. So let's see the question.
Cool.
Congratulations, nice presentation, by the way.
Thanks.
Really interesting. Really interesting. Did you find already some good questions?
So let's see. Yeah, we've got a few questions here. So I'll start with a technical question just to get it out of the way from Utubawe. So how much time will the game stay in pending review? That really depends on whether there's any issues with your video, any concerns that we have as a team, whether the game is too close to another game out there. Usually we'll go through these very quickly, so you should be going from the pending review stage to the pending SDK stage very quickly in your dashboard. If it takes more than a couple of days, then there's probably some concern there.
Yes. Okay, next question from Sartak Madan. Hey guys, in your opinion, how far back should we look when trying to revive prototype? It depends. You should go back as far as you get something interesting. If you want to revive your prototype, you need to have certain KPIs and already some traction on it, just like Alexander said. So basically, there is no limit to this. But the limit would be that having simply no traction or just simply bad result. There is no point to revive a prototype that has bad result. You need to have a minimum result in order to revive this prototype.
That's right. And as we mentioned, we've been really focusing on innovation. So make sure that when you're reviving the prototype, for instance, first of all, it needs to show really good promise. And second of all, you need to really come up with an idea that changes the gameplay or that adds innovation to the game. Just taking another question from Piwak. You were testing a multiplayer game. What do we think about it? Do we cover the server costs? The truth is that a great way to test for multiplayer games is to create AI bots in your game. There's not going to be a massive impact from making it an actual multiplayer. So make sure that you test those kinds of versions before we start thinking about actual real multiplayer games.
A good multiplayer game is a fake one, just to sum up. And if there are some server costs, don't worry. Obviously, we'll find a way in order to do it properly. I wanted to know the innovation on basketball games or sport game like Flappy Dunk, Dunk It is dead. Nice one from Milpil. Yes, the sports game are a little bit dead right now. One of the reasons would be that they are not really mass market in a way that they are most of the time masculine. It was a trend really famous 1 year ago. So yeah, it doesn't seem to be that much in a fashion right now. That said, some sport game could be really interesting in terms of the mechanic. The soul of some really good sport game can be interesting. Basketball is it's a ball into a circle. You can find some inspiration from the basketball in Perfect Hit, for example, at some point. So it's still a good inspiration. But when you find a gameplay on that type of game, sport game, really move far from the sport in order to just take the essence of the game.
Cool. We have another question from Rob Cornwall. How's it going? Interesting question. You are asking about trends and whether iterative games like Baseball Boy, so I think we call them incremental, was that a trend that was a trend that rose quickly and then fell? Do we think that IO games are following the same trend, or is it a longer term trend? Really good question.
Yeah.
We're actually following that closely. You're right, incremental games kind of faded, and it's good to stay away from them to the extent you can, unless you bring something original to the table. For IO games, we've actually seen quite a few come out recently. So we had Hole, we now have Tornado.io.
But it will die. It will die, obviously, like everything, it's the life. When Baseball Boy came out, we received a lot of Baseball Boy copycat, etc., etc. Thomas is doing a lot of noise. Don't know why. So yes, everything dies. Specifically, trends in gaming. So the best way to have a success is not to follow a trend, but to create a new one. It's a little bit close to the presentation from last week. So it's a really good question because you are always tempted, by the facility, the easiness of following the trend. Instead of a tornado, you put, I don't know, a rows of chicken or, a big, a vortex or stuff like that. It's kind of easy because you already have a frame, but you need to create the new frame in order to reach success, real success, So.
Yeah, I mean, exactly, and it's a risk-reward thing, as you said. So you're taking less risk by following a trend, but you might be catching the tail end of a trend if you do so.
Yeah.
Cool.
Create the new trends, guys. Just create the new trend. Stop following the other one. It's much better if you create something new. A little bit of ego, Another two questions.
Another couple questions, guys. Let's see. We've got one question about 2D versus 3D. From Legal Radiation Team, which is a cool name, by the way.
Legal Radiation.
It's nice to keep it legit. We were answering those questions a little while back, a few months back. We've been tending towards 3D. I don't think that's necessarily a trend, or if it is, it's a long-term trend, and it might be here to stay.
Mm-hmm.
So I would definitely move. When it comes to abstract versus figurative, we always say that it's good to tell a small story in a game, but equally, if you look at the top charts and our top games, you'll find oftentimes that it's quite abstract. It really depends on the kind of game that you're proposing.
Yes. It's a longer trend, the 3D one. So I think we should stick to it for a while. But once again, we don't want to be too radical, in the feedback that we tell you. We can just give you a hint into the direction of 3D. But if you are really confident in yourself and you think you can create a new trend with the 2D game, just go. And we encourage you to do it for sure. One last question. You found a new one, a good one. Is there a way to tell publisher about an idea and see? No.
Yeah. So just another question from Utu Bawe. Is there a good way to tell publishers about the idea before starting the prototype? The truth is, actually, we're here to help. We try to focus on spending your time best. So we usually kick in when your game reaches kind of similar to Perfect Hit, that kind of 40% day 1, 10% day 7. Your CPI is relatively low, meaning you're getting about north of 100 users a day on game analytics. Those are the kind of prototypes we want to spend more time with you on. And the best way to figure out what those metrics are and whether it's high potential is to test those games. So that's it's kind of a catch-22.
Yes. One thing I wanted to tell you guys before we left is one thing we discovered recently. It's maybe not a trend, but it's more like a guidelines of creation. So you can apply that in every game. It's to give a sensation of power to the player. We received a lot of different gameplay where you are trapped into the gameplay. You are like a little chick that need to avoid some ball, or a little pussy trying to avoid some ball. It's really complicated. You have no clue. You don't know where to go. You are like a victim in the game. Don't be a victim in the game. Be exactly the opposite. Make the player feel like he's God. Like in All.io, you are swallowing an entire city. Even in Snake vs. Block, you are destroying blocks. You are on your own and you are doing something. You are in a situation of power in the game, and it's really important to empower the player rather than making him like a victim. So this is something really interesting, and this is a common pattern that we see in every game that is successful. Hope it was clear.